My name is Paul Cienfuegos. I'm the founding director of Community Rights US, national organization based in Portland, Oregon, and I'm excited to be spending the next hour with Will Falk, who is one of the two amazing co-organizers, co-visionaries of the Protect Thacker Pass campaign in far northern Nevada, near the little town of Orovada, Nevada, that has the very ambitious goal of trying to stop an absolutely massive lithium mine from being constructed at all. Um, and I'm going to kind of do an overview briefly before I ask Will to dive in. Here's the sorts of things, Will, that I'd love to be spending the hour talking with you about. Love to hear you introduce yourself first briefly, and then do an introduction to the Thacker Pass mine controversy. Um, and then why we as Americans should care about this specific mine issue as opposed to all the other crazy, horrible mines that are going on. Your particular vision for your campaign at protectthackerpass.org. Who are the various relevant players on the ground in this issue? And I know that you and Max Wilbert, your co-organizer, have a very particular critique of the so-called green energy and green cars so-called revolution. I think that'd be really interesting to hear about briefly. And finally, what you want our listeners to do so they can be as powerful as possible, be they people who can make it to Thacker Pass and people who cannot. So again, welcome, Will Falk. Pleasure to have you here for the hour. Why don't we start with you giving a brief introduction to who you are?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Paul. Thanks for inviting me to participate in this marathon. It sounds like a really great event that you all have going on. Yeah, my name is Will Falk. I am an author and an attorney. I have written one book. It's called How Dams Fall, and it is a book about my involvement with a rights of nature lawsuit that we brought on behalf of the Colorado River, where I then went and traveled with the Colorado River in an effort to take her testimony for that court case. I'm a lawyer that's been involved in specifically the rights of nature movement for the last almost 5 years now. But I always say that I consider myself a biophilic author and attorney. And when I say that, I mean that my allegiance is first and foremost to the natural world. It's first and foremost to the land and to the countless other than human beings that we share this beautiful planet with. So that basic idea really informs all of my work, and in fact is the primary reason that I'm here in Thacker Pass. So yeah, I'm actually sitting in my car in Thacker Pass, which is on the traditional ancestral lands of both the Northern Paiute and Western Shoshone peoples. The nearest reservation is the Fort McDermott Paiute and Shoshone Reservation. It's about 40 miles as the crow flies from Thacker Pass. It is about 65 miles north of Winnemucca, Nevada. And I think it's only about 15 or 20 miles from the Oregon border. But Thacker Pass is really personifies and exemplifies the Great Basin landscape. I'm sitting in between two mountain ranges, the Montana Mountains to my north and the Double H Mountains to my south. And I'm sitting in a patch of some of the best remaining old growth sagebrush habitat left on the planet. There are sagebrush plants here that are over 100 years old. Most people don't know that sagebrush can live for a really long time. And these are a keystone species in the Great Basin. This is also a really important habitat for greater sage grouse, one of the most iconic species in the American West. It is a really important habitat for pronghorn antelope, which are called sagebrush obligates, which means that they only eat sagebrush. And places like Thacker Pass are really critically important to pronghorn antelope. There are about 12 golden eagle nests in the hills around Thacker Pass. We regularly see all kinds of mice and rabbits and even kangaroo rats. There are bobcats and foxes and mule deer and coyote in Thacker Pass. Um, and this place is very sacred to especially the Fort McDermott Paiute folk. Um, this is a place that was the scene of a terrible massacre, and that massacre is remembered for the way that the victims of that massacre actually had their stomachs cut open and their entrails spread across the sagebrush, which has given this name Rotten Moon in the Paiute language. The
God.
pass kind of forms a moon crescent shape. And when the hunters that had left their village came back to find their loved ones massacred, they called this place the Rotten Moon. It's also a place that has a lot of stone outcroppings and caves. And in the 1860s, when American soldiers were coming to round the Paiute people up to send them to reservations, many of the local Paiute hid in the caves up here, and they were able to avoid the cavalry for a long time. And because they held out for so long hiding in Thacker Pass, they were able to stay on the Fort McDermott reservation, which is a much closer place to their ancestral homelands than the reservations in Oregon and even in Washington State that the American Army was hoping to take them to. So in some ways, the way I understand it, and the way I've explained it, the fact that there are Paiute people nearby is directly attributable to hiding places in Thacker Pass.
Oh
We
boy.
all,
What an extraordinary history. But I guess it's not that different than settler native interactions all over the West, all over North America. Carry on.
it's a terrible story that has happened in just about every place that Europeans invaded on their way to dominating this continent. Um, we have also learned that there are burial sites here in Thacker Pass, and in the Paiute traditions, you simply do not disturb burial sites. That is one of the most offensive things you can do in the Paiute worldview in their traditional teachings. And the open pit lithium mine that has been permitted to be built here would destroy all those beings that I just listed, destroy all that history and all the cultural significance of Thacker Pass, and would disturb the ancestors of the native peoples who live here. So why is Thacker Pass in danger right now? Well, um, Thacker Pass is part of what is called the Fort McDermott Caldera, which is a big geographic feature that was formed about 17 million years ago by a volcano. It was actually the old Yellowstone hotspot that has, over millions of years drifted to Yellowstone National Park, but that volcanic activity was once here. And it formed this big caldera, and then a lake sat here, and that lake deposited lots and lots of lithium in the surrounding lands. So a Canadian corporation called Lithium Americas has formed an American subsidiary named Lithium Nevada, and they have applied to the Bureau of Land Management for a permit for a mine that the project itself would be 17,000 square acres. The mining operations would disturb about 6,000 square acres. And it would be an open pit mine. So they would dig out an open pit that would be 400 feet deep, and they would scrape out the clay stone that's here. The lithium exists in this clay stone here in Thacker Pass, and they would use a new process that is not being used anywhere else in the world to take sulfuric acid and leach the lithium out of the earth, and then scrape that lithium off and take it to markets all around the world. Some of the sort of salient problems with this mine is this is a water intensive process. It would depend on 52,000 acre feet of water per year, which is the equivalent to an average pumping rate of 3,224 gallons per minute in one of the driest regions in the world, and especially one of the driest regions in the United States. This comes at a time when the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation that deals with water in the West has recently started to alert the rest of the federal government and the people of the United States that they're on the verge of needing to make the federal government's first ever official water shortage declaration. And that water shortage declaration will force water consumption cuts in the state of Nevada. This mine would use a lot of water in a place where water is even more precious than it is in other places.
So are they racing to get the water approval for the mine before a declaration? I mean, is there some kind of relation between those two timed events?
I don't think that, so they still have to through the permitting process, they have to apply for it's a change in water use classification with the state of Nevada, where the water rights that they have bought have been exclusively used for agricultural purposes up till now, and in switching they have to get an official permit from the state of Nevada to switch that use to mining. And that isn't supposed to happen until September, as I understand it, which will be, long after the driest part, or right in the middle of the driest part of the year for the West. But it is likely that the Bureau of Reclamation, either way, will have to make that declaration before that usage is changed. I would imagine that corporations will not see their water cut as much or in as valuable ways as others will.
Maybe maybe talk about the already existing over allocation. That I understand that even before the mine came up as a proposal, there was already 1/3 beyond what water is estimated to be in the aquifer had already been allocated. So 1 1/3 of what's there had already been allocated pre-mine. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we're in what's called the Twin River Basin Water Management Unit. And the Quinn River Basin is already known to be over allocated by 30,000 um, acre feet a year. And this mine would add another 5,200 square acre feet of usage. So this is a problem that is affecting everyone across the West. Most of American water resources in the West are over allocated. This is a huge problem when when your economies all depend on big agricultural and big mining operations. We're simply using water that isn't being replaced, and the really terrifying thing is at a certain point that there won't be any water left. It doesn't take a math genius to know that if you continuously take more than can be replaced, eventually whatever
Yeah,
you're using
it's
runs
gone.
out.
Just a clarification on the numbers. I thought you said 52,000 acre feet, but you just said 5,200, which is
Yeah, it's 5,200.
5,200. Okay.
Yeah.
It's still a ghastly amount. Okay.
Um, I think one of the really heinous aspects of this mine, and I think is probably what would be most interesting to people listening, is the lithium that will be taken, or if they get this mine in, will be taken from this land, will be used primarily for electric car batteries. And because of that, Lithium Nevada and Lithium Americas are really billing their mine as a green mine, that they're involved in so-called clean energy. Um, but that's the total lie. First of all, this mine, when it's fully operational, will produce 152,703 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent emissions every year. Uh, it will require burning 11,300 gallons of diesel every single day to operate the mine. The sulfur that they need to make the sulfuric acid to leach the lithium from the ground is a waste byproduct from oil refineries. Um, and so, a lot of thinking around green energy, most people assume that when we bring on these alternative energies, that we then replace fossil fuels. Well, first, that's not true. Fossil fuel consumption continues to increase even as we bring alternative energies online. But what's especially important to understand in this kind of lithium mining is this lithium mine would depend on oil and gas refineries for the sulfur that it needs to leach the lithium from the earth. So you wouldn't be able to shut down too many oil and gas refineries to produce these electric car batteries, because the sulfur is needed from those oil and gas refineries.
This
So
can I jump in for a moment because we had a comment that seems especially appropriate for what you are just talking about right now. Um, um, Tyler asks for some commentary on the corporate rule aspect of this struggle and offers a quote from Tesla Corporation's Elon Musk. On July 24 of last year, Musk wrote on Twitter that a second U.S. government stimulus package is not in the best interests of the people. Someone responded to Musk soon after, quote, "You know what wasn't in the best interests of people? The U.S. government organizing a coup against Evo Morales in Bolivia so that you could obtain the lithium there." Musk then wrote back, quote, "We will coup whoever we want, deal with it," unquote. Any comments about corporate rule and lithium mining?
oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, corporations the corporations, one of the reasons why they're so powerful, uh I mean, there's a million reasons, but they're really good at understanding how to manipulate uh people's concerns and people's emotions to make more money. So one of the brilliant things that corporations have done over the last 10 or 20 years is they understanding that most people are understandably frightened of climate change and really concerned about climate change. They figured out how to market their corporate processes as somehow fighting climate change and using people's fears of climate change in order to do things like blow up a mountain in order to put a lithium mine in. Um, so yeah, it's that's one thing that's really happened with the so-called renewable energy movement, is all of a sudden we've taken environmentalists who really used to care about actually protecting the land and protecting the natural world, and we've turned them into lobbyists for corporations like Tesla, or even um, the fossil fuel corporations like Chevron and Shell, who are understanding that there's a lot of money to be made in these alternative energies, and are really pushing things like solar panels and electric car batteries and wind turbines. Um, so yeah, that's one of the big things that is going on here, is corporations have really used their marketing power, their wealth, to create a propaganda campaign that has really convinced a lot of people that We need things like lithium mine in order to save the planet. Um, and you know, that's corporations have so many resources to influence things like marketing and you know, publicity, that one of the reasons they stay in power is it's very difficult for us to combat those sorts of propaganda campaigns. You know, when they can level millions and billions of dollars, and we can have, you know, 28-hour Zoom marathons. You know, it's they can get a
Right.
Super Bowl
Yeah.
commercial, and we can, you know.
Right. We can get a couple dozen viewers. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Carla asks, what do you think would be a real alternative to meeting energy needs sustainably in this case? And I know, having started to read Derek Jensen's book, Bright Green Lies, also co-authored by your co-organizer, Max Wilbert, that you have a pretty particular and scathing critique of energy sustainability. So maybe you can talk a bit about that.
Yeah, first, I take a lot of issue with the term energy needs. Human beings do not need industrial energy to thrive and survive. Um, the so when I talk about you know, our energy needs, I really want to challenge this notion that it's a need. So human beings need clean water, human beings need clean air, human beings need healthy land to live on. At the same time, all those countless other species that we also depend upon for life, that work to create this intricately complex cooperation that is life on Earth. They definitely don't need industrial energy. They also need clean water, clean air, and healthy land and habitat. Um, so you know, if we want to talk about electric cars, for example, you know, one thing that corporations have really done is they've convinced human beings and they've convinced some human beings. I want to be clear, because there's many, the vast majority of human beings on Earth today don't actually have access to cars. So it's a small group of humans, the most privileged humans, the richest humans, that believe that we need automobiles. This is a shocking propaganda victory for corporations when you consider that it's only been the last 50 or 100 years that even most Americans have had access to automobiles. So human beings have been what are called Homo sapiens sapiens for, you know, the number keeps growing, but the last I heard, for 250,000 years. So for 250,000 years, our ancestors survived and thrived without cars. Um, the human body was we have evolved to run and to walk. One of the successes of our species is our ability to run long distances. That's how we were able to hunt, and that's how we were able to range to hunt and gather. And it's no wonder that so many of our health epidemics come from the lack of exercise that many human beings are suffering from today. And so, you know, for 249,900 years of human existence, we didn't have cars. So to think that we need cars to survive is to me just really untrue and sort of bad thinking. I
Or,
do understand that there are, in the United States, for example, there has been a concerted effort to force citizens into being dependent on cars through things like the development of suburbs, through the development of cities. There are plenty of places across the United States that you know, we've simply stripped of so many resources that we have to import resources to support those places. You know, but that of course is colonialism. That is, of course, need that whole system depends upon stealing resources from somewhere else and exporting them, usually with things like trucks and other fossil fuel based modes of transportation to give Americans what they need. And so, you know, at the bottom of this, I think it's morally wrong to destroy the rest of life on Earth, to provide some privileged humans a technology that they don't actually need to survive. When doing so, deprives all those other beings, humans and non-humans alike, of the things that they need to survive. So to me, the question isn't about how do we sustain our energy needs. The question is, how do we reduce our consumptions, reduce consumption, and learn how to live with the kind of energy that our ancestors always existed with, which is muscle power, which is sometimes using, the power of wind and water to transport ourselves. That to me is the only sustainable mode of technology, and that is the only mode of technology that doesn't require us to exploit someone else for what we claim we need.
Very, very well said, Will. Thank you. I just want to remind our viewers out there that this is a benefit. This is a 28 or so hour marathon that Community Rights US is running on Twitch. It's our first ever attempted fundraiser with Livestream Marathon online speakers, musicians, poets. In fact, one of the people who's listening right now is going to be up next from 1 to 2 p.m. Pacific time. Fernanda Ibarra is going to be sharing an hour of poetry on the topic of where evolution meets social change. From 2 to 4 p.m. today Pacific, Alan Wilbar will be presenting a play called Learning Man, a play about brain injury and recovery with poetry and music. And from 4 p.m. for we're not sure exactly how long, closing our marathon is Martin Zarzar, world music multi-instrumentalist, singer, and composer. It's really quite an extraordinary collection of participants who are joining us for this marathon. So if you scroll down on the Twitch page that you're currently all on, you will see something that says click here to donate, and we would sure love it if you could donate $1 or $5 or $20 or $100. It would make an enormous difference to Community Rights US. We're just going to take a short break. I'm going to play a 2-minute Community Rights US announcement, and we will be right back in 2 minutes. Thanks so much, everybody.
Did you know it's illegal for local governments to pass laws that protect their communities from controversial court activities like oil pipelines, genetically modified crops, fracking, and clear-cut logging?
Did you know that corporations have more constitutionally protected rights than people do?
Enter the community rights movement.
Since 1999, 200 towns, cities, and counties in 9 states have passed locally enforceable laws that ban specific harmful corporate activities and put decision-making back in the hands of local people.
We want to bring this incredibly successful community-based strategy to every community in this country.
We've assembled an amazing network of people and organizations to provide communities with the support and training that they need to run successful community rights campaigns.
Our work transcends conventional single-issue activism. We think of it as a rights-based strategy, which allows progressives and conservatives to have a much easier time coming together to protect the health, safety, and welfare of residents and the local environment. Community rights lawmaking can protect our right to clean water and safe food, our right to free and fair elections, our right to living wage jobs, and our right to a renewable energy future.
But this movement is about more than just reclaiming our local lawmaking. It is also about catalyzing a profound culture shift.
Imagine the possibilities in your community if more and more of your neighbors and co-workers could envision themselves as taking an active role in the governance of their own communities.
We are, in fact,
contribution will greatly expand the reach of the community rights movement.
Thank you for your support and for sharing our fundraising campaign with others. Okay, we're back with Will Falk, who's one of the two amazing organizers. He and Max Wilbert launched a campaign to protecttthackerpass.org is their contact info. Thank you, Maura Stevens, for making a donation. So appreciate it. We've got him here for another half an hour talking about the Thacker Pass campaign. And I just wanted to do a quick follow-up on something you just said, Will. You know, I've lived pretty much my entire adult life on something approximating $1,000 a month, which is considered poverty wages. And I've never been much of a big consumer. And until a few months ago, I didn't even own a car because I just didn't want to be part of it. And it was kind of fun to get around without a car and to learn how to do that. And that's just been natural to me. But we live in a highly consumptive society. And we've really taught the world that consuming is how you experience pleasure. It's really quite obscene. Corporate capitalism and industrial civilization. And I've felt that really since I was a teenager. I've had that general gut instinct. And yet when you talk about reverting back to energy being mostly from muscle power and non-industrial wind and solar and water, I think it must be incredibly hard for the average person in this country to even imagine. I mean, that really sounds like the end of life for almost everybody. If, you know, obviously it's very complicated to get there. I mean, I know this is a really big topic, and I want to get onto a lot of other things, but just in a minute or two, how do you even talk about that kind of really radical shift back towards what I'm assuming is maybe 1 or 5 or 10% of our current energy use, like as rapidly as possible before the rest of the ecological life forces on this planet are dead?
Well, I mean, that's just it is, you know, I don't expect, I think too many of our political strategies involve us trying to convince people of doing the right thing, or convincing a majority of people to agree to these drastic energy reductions. And if we are going to wait, I think that's not a viable political strategy, and it's certainly not going to leave us a planet with any life left on it. If we're going to have to wait for everybody to agree to give up the comforts of civilization, then we're going to be waiting until there's no life left on Earth. So
how do we get there?
Well, to me, we have to actually make those technologies impossible. We're not going to get most people to agree with us, so we have to take those things away from them, unfortunately. The good news or the bad news, depending on if you identify with all the life that we've lost getting to this point, is I don't think that there's going to be another oil revolution. We've simply used too much fossil fuels. It's not left here on Earth. And if we could seriously cripple the industrial infrastructure that produces those energies and technologies, I don't think it would be possible for them to really rebuild it. And then, you know, just like with any addict, you know, in order for an addict to recover, you have to take what they're addicted to away. You cannot give them access to that thing. And so to me, it means, you know, directly dismantling those technologies and making them as impossible as possible to for people to access them.
So it's the dismantling of industrial civilization against the will of the majority, I think, is what you're saying is required, which sounds like a tall order. I mean, I'm not opposed to that, but is that generally correct, what you're saying?
Well, and I think we have to define the majority. You know, are we defining the majority as most Americans? Are we defining the majority as most humans? Are we defining the majority as all of life? Because
Good
I would
points.
imagine that most of the people who are being directly murdered by civilization today would agree that civilization needs to come down. And I would imagine that all of the 200 species that are going to go extinct today while we're talking wished that civilization would have come down a long time ago. So again, it's who is the majority that we're talking about, and can we count on, let's say the majority of Americans, most of whom benefit from the destruction of the natural world, can we really count on them to come up with a majority that seriously threatens the privileges that they have? I don't think so. And I don't think that we're required to have that majority in order to act.
Carla is asking if you can expand on your vision of what that world looks like with significantly less energy. How would people's lifestyles change? I hate the word lifestyles personally. How would people's lifestyles change, particularly within big cities? In industrial nations, I think really we don't have big cities in industrial nations anymore, right? That's how they would change, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I mean, quite simply, hunter-gatherers. We human beings evolved to be hunter-gatherers. For most of our history, we existed as hunter-gatherers. There are still something like 40 hunter-gatherer cultures left on Earth. I think it's the kind of living that our bodies are calling for us to return to. Yeah, cities are part of the problem, probably one of the primary problems. Cities, cities as populations of humans living in densities so large that they denude the resources around them, they strip the land of resources around them, and eventually they have to steal those resources from someone else. That is the history of civilization, is human population growing and growing and growing and encountering traditional cultures that live in a sustainable way, who don't want to give their resources up. And eventually those traditional cultures have to be destroyed in order for cities to get the resources that they need. So yeah, there won't be cities, and cities are at the heart of the problem.
So let's go back to talking specifically about the Thacker Pass lithium mine. I was there, I was camped there and in the vicinity doing work around the mine in support of you guys for about 2 weeks. I just came home a couple days ago. It was an absolutely extraordinary experience, personal experience for me. I've done a lot of work in ancient forest protection on Vancouver Island and other places in my lifetime, working for Friends of Clayoquot Sound at one point years ago. I never realized that there was such a thing as old growth sagebrush. I'd kind of ignored sagebrush. I grew up in Albuquerque. I saw a lot of sagebrush in New Mexico, but I never really thought of it as an ecologically productive place. I wanted to just get the hell out of the Southwest and get into some lushness in the Northwest as soon as I was old enough to leave home. So I was really quite impressed and stunned over the last few weeks to learn, to really see giant sagebrush and to learn about basically what I'm now imagining is an ancient forest of sagebrush, a never denuded area, and of course the incredible wildlife that is associated with it, like sage grouse and antelope and other creatures. So I find myself really enamored with this project, and I'm personally planning on coming back and committing to being one of the many, hopefully one of the hundreds and hundreds of people who commit nonviolent direct action this summer or fall, if that's needed, to stop this mine from ever being built. And I can imagine that you and Max have a particular vision about trying to stop as much lithium mining as possible in the United States, even beyond this mine, to really take a chink out of this Elon Musk insanity fantasy about so-called green energy. So talk about the direct action campaign that you are thinking might be necessary starting in the next weeks and months.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of confidence. There has been 2 lawsuits filed against the Bureau of Land Management for permitting the mine. From from a legal perspective, there's not really the lawsuits can only kick the process back into the permitting phase, into the environmental impact statement phase. So another way to say this, or what I'm really trying to say, is the Bureau of Land Management is required to issue permits to Lithium Nevada for this project, as long as Lithium Nevada promises to follow the regulations, or writes a good enough environmental impact statement where they say they will follow the regulations. The BLM, again, is legally obligated, legally required to give those permits. It doesn't matter that local ranchers and farmers don't want this mine. It doesn't matter that the Fort McDermott tribe doesn't want this mine. Because this is public land, and because the American Congress in 1872 passed the General Mining Law of 1872, which says that mining hard rock minerals is the highest use of public lands, BLM will be required to give these permits. So the lawsuits can say, hey, you didn't think about this enough, go back and have your experts deliberate on this and write up a new environmental impact statement. And that can delay the project, and that would be a good thing to delay it. But they can't really stop it if Lithium Americas is determined to write the environmental impact statement in the right way. So it's also, the federal legislature, the American Congress knows that one of the sources of American power is in mining minerals like lithium. The Biden administration campaigned on this transition to so-called clean energy. It seems almost impossible to think that somehow the American government is going to step in and say we shouldn't have lithium mining, we shouldn't destroy places like Thacker Pass. Especially when the corporations who control the government stand to make a lot of money from destroying places like Thacker Pass. This is something that's so totally common across our environmental and social justice movements. And one of the things that I often say is, we should know by now that asking other people to do the right thing for us hasn't worked. So we often go and ask a judge to stop these destructive projects when the judge, one, probably can't even stop the project, and two, is definitely disinclined to stopping projects like these. Or we try to go to our elected representatives, many of whom again are in corporate pockets, and have no interest in seriously threatening projects like the Thacker Pass open pit lithium mine. So we have to learn how to stop these projects by ourselves. And to me, that is going to require force. We're going to have to actually stop the construction equipment from accessing Thacker Pass to do what it needs to be done, to do the mine. So, as you said, we have made a strategic decision that our campaign and Protect Thacker Pass is going to be committed to principles of nonviolence. We've made that strategic decision because we've been so outspoken about this issue that if someone decided to engage in more serious kinds of tactics, we would be the first ones that they come to, and we would probably not be very effective at using those tactics because we're so surveilled as it is. That's not to say that other kinds of physical force can't stop projects. We all know what happened at Standing Rock and how direct action ultimately failed to stop the pipeline there. But two women, Jessica Resnicek and Ruby Montoya, in their late 20s and early 30s, went on a campaign of sabotaging the pipeline there, and actually slowed up the pipeline for longer than all of the nonviolent direct actionists at Standing Rock achieved. So, you know, we do think that there will have to be tactics of all kinds. The camp will not be engaging in anything other than nonviolent direct action. And because that's true, we think that the way that we'll be able to stop the construction equipment is if we can have enough bodies to stand in front of the equipment, to barricade roads, to prevent the construction equipment's access of the site. And that will likely take a lot of people. You know, that's another disadvantage to nonviolent direct action, is it does take a lot of people to do. But you know, if we can't count on the courts and we can't count on the government, we've got to get the power from ourselves and from the grassroots, and we're hoping to catalyze that kind of you know, movement, and catalyze that kind of courage in people to come out and join us and try and protect this beautiful place.
Right on. And one of the things that I experienced firsthand over the last few weeks being there was that the indigenous local people, the Paiute and the Shoshone people, who have been put in these awful reservation, third world situation reservations in various nearby areas around Thacker Pass, seem to be the only people locally who are mobilizing their people effectively, and they're the folks who are economically, you know, in pretty dire straits, whereas the very economically privileged and white ranchers, who many of them own multi-thousand acre patches of what was sagebrush wilderness and is now hay-growing flatlands that are constantly plowed, and I just watched the topsoil leaving in the wind day after day with their endless plowing. What little topsoil there must even be in this place. It is quite a remarkable, you know, after being there 2 weeks and talking to a number of these ranchers and trying to help them mobilize, that there's hardly a single rancher in the region who has the wherewithal, the guts, the chutzpah to stand up and say publicly, out loud, I'm opposed to this mine, as opposed to I'm mad about this mine, but I feel hopeless and powerless, and so all I'm going to do is ask for some ameliorations around the edges. So, you know, the privileged people and the majority people in the area, the white folks, are virtually doing nothing effective to stop the mine, and they could be actually quite effective if they were mobilizing and organizing themselves. So what does that tell you about class privilege and race privilege? Do you have any comments about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the main difference between native folks and settler folks here around Thacker Pass is many of the white folks have the wealth to sell their land and leave. You know, they have wealth in the form of land. So if they get too upset with the mine, many of them are saying, well, I'll just sell my stuff and move away. You know, it's a lot different when your people have existed here for thousands of years and you know that your ancestors are buried in the land that they want to destroy, where you don't have the financial means to just get up and leave. When you and your ancestors have hunted on this land for generations, when your traditions teach you that the Creator put you here to be the caretaker of this land, it's a totally different worldview, I think, than what a lot of the local white folks here are coming from. And you know, it is again a situation that seems to play out across the United States and around the world. People who can, you know, avoid destruction, leave and go somewhere else often do, despite the fact that they could offer resources that people who can't leave just simply don't have access to. And it's another reason why I think it's so important. You know, I am a white person. I think it's so important that you know, white people start to take seriously our responsibility to stand with these people. You know, many of us have benefited from the theft of native land. our ancestors maybe participated in the theft of that land. And I think it's time for us, especially now with the health of the land so so degraded, and with how many centuries of genocide and land theft that has happened to Native people, that we really step up and actually put our bodies on the line, and that we join with Native peoples and work to protect their lands, and that we do so without expecting something in return. That we do it just because it's the right thing to do, and that's I would really like to say that to other white people, like it's time for us to stand up, and it's time for us to be a generation that actually stands in solidarity, and doesn't just keep taking and keep benefiting without doing much or anything to actually protect the people that whose lands we're on.
Right on, Will. I could not agree more. And during my time there, I was really profoundly moved by the ongoing, quiet, humble work that you and Max have been doing in your ongoing outreach and relationship building with the local Native communities. And just watching, with my own eyes just last weekend, the ceremonies that happened there, and the political conversations between you folks and the local Native people who came to the proposed mine site for the day. It's all been very moving, and I'm planning on trying to bring as many people with me the next time as I can. We have about 4 or 5 minutes left. The hour has flown by, as it always does, and just wondering in closing if you can talk about what you want the people who are hearing this interview to do, those who both can get to Thacker Pass and those who cannot. And again, their campaign website is protectthackerpass.org, and you can get a ton of information through that website.
Yeah, the first thing I'm going to say is definitely not the easy one. We really need bodies here, and we really need people who can commit to this campaign for a long time. The relationships that need to be built, the trust that has to be earned with local communities is not something that can happen in a weekend. It's something that takes effort and time, and a willingness to ask people what they need, and then a willingness to try and do it when they tell you what they need, help them gain what they need. I understand that things are really scary right now, with COVID still being a problem, with financial and economic concerns being what they are. I understand how scary of a proposition that is, and I understand how hard it will be for a lot of folks to make that kind of decision. But we do need to remember where we are in this ecological moment. Like I said, we're losing 100 to 200 species every day that are driven to extinction. We're losing thousands of square acres of old growth forests every single day. The World Health Organization says that over 7 million human beings are killed by air pollution every single year. That's more than the number of Jews that were killed in the Holocaust, and that's going on every single year. So, any victory that we ultimately win, the longer that it takes for that to happen, the more of the world we will have lost, the less amount of life will be able to exist in the future. And I really think that it's really hard and difficult, and it sucks, and it makes me angry that we have to be the ones that finally put our foot down, and we have to be the generation, or one of the generations that ends this culture once and for all. But unfortunately, that's the responsibility we've been left with, and that's what we owe to our children and our grandchildren, and to the rest of life on Earth to do. So my big thing is, and before I talk about some of the easier things to do, is I would really ask people to stop and look into their own heart and think about really changing your life to fight for what's left of the natural world. You know, we need everyone that can do that, and that's the kind of sacrifices we really need. I know that a lot of people won't be able to do that. Maybe you have people that depend on you. Maybe you have, health issues that make that just not an option for you. I understand that, and that's, I understand that. If you're not someone that can come out to the front lines and commit to a campaign like this, check out our website. We sometimes make calls out for support. As the campaign keeps going, there may be opportunities to do things like, put pressure on corporations, blast out our press releases, really get the word out. We do have a donation button on our website. The donations go for things like gas for people coming here, fuel for our own local organizing efforts, supplies, camping supplies, food, and eventually we will likely need money for bail and, legal defense. So that's where your money will go to. We'll put it to good use. And that is something that we need all the time.
There's just a couple of quick comments in the moments we have left. Thank you for your thoughtful observations, Will. Thank you so much for your work, Will. Great interview. ProtectThackerPass.org is their website. You can actually, you can write to them right through the website, and they will respond, I think, quite quickly. And you can also sign up for alerts. Is that correct? There's a way on the website to sign up and get your regular newsletter alerts?
Yeah, and we are, that is true, and a good thing to do. We're also on social media like Facebook, Protect Thacker Pass. You can follow the page and also join up in a group where we talk about things we need and just give updates. So I forgot that part.
Great. Okay. So we are entirely out of time, Will. I so appreciate your time. I'm really moved by what you and Max have done. I'll be heading back there sometime in the next month, hopefully with a carload of other people. I hope other people take this work really seriously. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time, Will, and all of your work.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
All right. we're going to move towards a quick break, and Fernanda Ibarra, who is ready to go, is going to be on next, Where Evolution Meets Social Change, a poetry hour. I can't wait. I'll be watching. Bye, Will. Bye, everybody.